Number 5. The Lexington. If you're a Texas native, then you probably don't need much introduction to the USS Lexington. Formerly known as the Blue Ghost, the decommissioned aircraft carrier now stands as a museum, and it's thought by some to hold a lot more than some old war relics and stories. Might just contain some old souls who've never quite left its service. The museum's director of operations, Charles Russell, claims that the museum receives hundreds upon hundreds of reports of supernatural and inexplicable activity and sightings every single year. Most famous among them is a benevolent ghost dressed in a sailor's uniform who aids guests in finding their way around the ship before vanishing back into the air. He describes one particularly vivid encounter with a spirit inhabiting his office where, after losing 6 pens over the course of a week, he found all of them arranged perfectly, laying side by side in front of his keyboard. He reassures visitors that the spirits who live aboard the Lexington are playful, not frightful. They're more like Casper in that regard, I guess. Other stories tell sightings and reports of hearing lost souls running for cover after a torpedo attack, describing running sounds and other strange noises in the hangar bay. The paranormal tour guide aboard the Lexington describes it as, this was their home and they don't want to go anywhere else. I kind of get it, you know? I'd want to live on an aircraft carrier, that seems pretty cool. I'd try to swing that as long as I could. Like most purportedly haunted locations, if finding something spooky in the cold steel of the Lexington truly interests you, the museum offers a paranormal investigation tour where guests can spend the night with their own equipment in the hopes of finding someone to trip up your EVP meter. And if that ain't enough for you and you're looking for something spooky from the confines of your own home, well, we can hook you up with that real easy. Click through on Top 5 Scary because we've got loads of videos about haunted spots, ghosts, ghouls, goblins, aliens, cryptids, conspiracies, and just about anything freaky you can think up. Stay subscribed, stay scared, but, you know, stay watching this video as well, okay? We worked hard. Number 4. Le Carafe. Le Carafe up in Houston looks unassuming at first. Looks like a pretty typical dive bar experience. Looks nice though, I definitely would like to go. But if you believe the rumors, allegedly this is one of the most haunted buildings in the entire state. The bar also is one of the oldest buildings in Texas as well, having been initially built sometime in the early 1800s. It's seen life as quite a few things: a pharmacy, an apothecary, a bakery, and eventually Le Carafe. So it's not too surprising that in all of its years of service, picked up a few guests who aren't ready to pay the bill and leave just yet. Many regular customers have a ghost story to tell you, as well as the bartenders. Many report strange noises, a glass breaking mysteriously, some even seeing lipstick stains on a glass they're drinking from appear out of nowhere. Do ghosts have germs? Is it safe to share a drink with a ghost? I don't know if I would do that unless we got to know each other a bit first, and then hey, anything can happen. I'm open. The bar is said to be haunted by a former tender named Carl, who frequent guests claim they can hear shouting out for last call still years after passing the bar. Some claim they can see Carl's silhouette through a second-floor window. Another ghost said to haunt the premises is the Lady in White, who supposedly pushed attractive women down the stairs. Hardly a way to get them to like you, let me tell you from experience. She's thought to be the ghost of a woman who ran a cat house near the Carafe. Believers say that they see orbs and mist in photos and feel cold spots all over. I guess you could say they serve up more than one kind of spirits. I'll see myself out. I'm sorry, that's not my best work. If you're ever in Houston and looking for a bit of spooky ambiance, definitely check out the Carafe and all of its otherworldly guests. Just make sure to tip your ghost about 15%.
Number 3 on this list is the White Witch of the Rose Hall Plantation in Jamaica. The Rose Hall Plantation is near Montego Bay. However, the witch in question is the ghost of a witch named Annie Palmer, and Annie Palmer wasn't from Jamaica at all. In fact, Annie Palmer spent most of her life in Haiti. She was born there and lived there with her parents for quite some time until they sadly passed away due to yellow fever. Afterwards, she was adopted by a witch who wasn't shy in passing her gifts on to young Annie. Regularly practicing witchcraft and voodoo, Annie soon became a strong witch in her own right. After she grew up, she moved to Jamaica and married John Palmer, taking his last name. Now this is where things get a little bit crazy though. Annie murdered John Palmer. Then she got married again and murdered that husband. And then she got married again and murdered that husband. You'd think that these guys would have recognized that marrying Annie might not have been the best idea, but I guess love just conquers all. Annie didn't stop with her husbands though. She murdered countless slaves that worked on that plantation. This was right up until she was murdered herself by a slave named Taku. The people back then attempted to perform a voodoo ritual on this witch, not wanting to have her ever return again. However, it didn't work the way that they intended it to. The voodoo ritual actually trapped her at this location, and now she's said to be forever haunting the Rose Hall on Montego Bay. People have seen her ghost before, and they've heard screaming coming from nothing. The vision of a woman in white will appear sometimes, and it is said that if you stay at this plantation too long, then some deep misfortune will fall upon you or your family. So beware. Number 2 on this list is Jenny Greenteeth. Jenny Greenteeth is a witch in British folklore that is said to haunt the waters of Lancashire, Cheshire, and Shropshire. I know, it's a lot of shires. Jenny is a river witch and lives in the rivers of these areas looking for victims to drag down with her. As you'd imagine, with a name like Greenteeth, her appearance is pretty grotesque. Green algae-like hair, a wrinkled witchy face, skin that is the same color as a bog, and a weird fleshy exterior. Jenny is certainly not a looker. But I suppose it doesn't matter a whole lot, as she uses the swamp like water and pond scum to mask her appearance so you can't see her beneath the filth. The origin of Jenny Greenteeth is still up for debate, but the bare bones of the tale are pretty consistent. Jenny was a girl in a local British town who was the victim to some heavy bullying. One day when she was at her job getting water from the well, somebody yelled at her that they hope she falls in and dies. Well, that's exactly what happened. Her spirit manifested as Jenny Greenteeth, this old hag who now haunts the waters in this area. Jenny is not simply a harmless witch either. She preys on people, specifically children that get too close to the water. Sometimes she will try to lure them towards the riverbank by calling out to them or singing a tune where no one can figure out where it's coming from. Now, this tactic is one that we've talked about on this channel before with the Utah water babies and is very successful. She lunges her hand out and grabs them, dragging them into the water or they will drown and never be seen again. This water witch is known by all the locals in the area, with everyone having some slightly different adaptations to the legend. General consensus though, if you hear someone singing from the rivers of Britain, don't go near it. Number 1 on this list is La Lechuza. La Lechuza is a witch based in Mexican folklore that is said to haunt the Mexican nights. I wish I could pinpoint the location down for you guys to be a specific region in Mexico, but this witch is sadly far too mobile for that. La Lechuza used to live in a small Mexican town and regularly practice witchcraft. Her intentions were foul though, and would regularly cause harm to others, whether that be to them directly or to their livelihood. The townsfolk, once they discovered that she was the cause of their misfortune, raided her home and viciously murdered her. They didn't kill her well enough though, because her spirit still clings to life to this day. Said to regularly take the form of an owl and fly throughout Mexico, La Lechuza is constantly on the hunt for food. Her preferred meal is young men. This bird is apparently massive, and once it sets its sights on you, it will be nearly impossible to escape. Some people have reported that she is so big that they've seen her run cars off of the road and eat her victims in the wreck. She also employs some other tactics instead of just brute force. Sometimes she will mask her voice as a baby and sit outside your door until you open it, and then she'll pounce. You may also hear the consistent racket of an owl howling in the night. Go and check your window to see what the commotion is and become this owl lady's dinner. Basically, she is a giant owl that you can't run from, you can't beat in a fight, and is also able to outwit you with some strange tactics. She haunts all of Mexico, and you just need to hope that if you were there, she doesn't pick you to be her next meal.
Coming in at number 5, we have Aradale Asylum in Ararat, Victoria, Australia. Aradale Asylum opened its doors in 1865. It was originally named Ararat Lunatic Asylum. It was opened along with 2 sister asylums at Kew and Beechworth to accommodate the growing number of lunatics in the colony of Victoria. The asylum was built as a town within a town, with its own market gardens, orchard, vineyards, piggery, and other stock kept on the ground. As nice as that sounds, those kept there were called inmates rather than patients, and their treatment was not kind. Many people were sent to the asylum for different reasons, mostly those struggling with mental health, and others dumped there for petty reasons. It was home to many men, women, and also children. Both electric shock therapy and the lobotomy were performed en masse at Aradale. Death was another factor that contributed to the dark history that cloaks Aradale. It is estimated that at least 13,000 deaths occurred throughout Aradale's many buildings during its 130 years of operation, meaning that up to a third of patients who entered the hospitals never came out. It is considered Australia's most haunted building to this this day. There is currently only one tour operator allowed to go into the building. People who have visited the building have a lot of similar stories about various hauntings. Many experience a bitter taste in their mouth while visiting one of the offices. When this was looked into, it is revealed that one of the head doctors poisoned himself in that very room. Others felt a weird tingling in one side or all over their body while in the electric shock therapy room. Some see faces or shadows, others hear screams or banging. There is not much to be known about the people who died within the walls or who might remain, making it a very dangerous haunted location to any visitor. Coming in at number 4, we have the Bangara Fort, India. The ruins of a fort city built in the 17th century. Bangara Fort consists of fort walls, bazaars, havelis, royal palaces, and numerous temples, with 3 grand stories you can explore. But do not be fooled by the beauty of these ruins, as they are ranked as the most haunted fort in India. The place is considered to be so haunted, entry is restricted after sunset, so if you're wanting to explore, you will have to do it in the safety of the sunlight. It is known that there is a curse that hangs over the fort, put there by Singhir, someone who is well versed in black magic. He fell in love with the Princess Ratnavati, known far and wide for her beauty and kindness. Knowing he did not stand a chance with her, he enchanted her perfume so that when she used it, she would fall deeply in love with him. The princess found out about this and threw the bottle. As it flew through the air, it turned into a boulder and crushed Singhir. He was crushed under its weight, but before he died, he cursed the princess, her family, and the entire village. The next year, a battle was fought between the forces of Bangara and Ajabgarh, which led to the death of Ratnavati and most of the army. This was believed to be a result of the curse. It was due to this curse that no one in the village or fort could be reborn. It is forever condemned to desolation and is inhabited by ghosts. If any villager tries to build a roof, it apparently mysteriously collapses. The curse is said to have trapped the souls of those lost within the desolate fort. The guards keep watch to ensure no one enters after dark. It is not a safe place to be when the spirits awake at night.
Number 3 on this list is Snake Island. So we had Monkey Island, now this is Snake Island. Just the name Snake Island sounds scary as hell. Sounds like something that you'd hear about in a Scooby-Doo novel, let alone in real life. AZ Animal says, Ilha da Quimera Grande is home to Bothrops insularis. It's also known as the golden lancehead viper. This snake is a relative of the mainland's deadliest snake, the fer de lance. This snake is very noteworthy because it exists only on Snake Island. There's no other place on Earth that you can find this animal. The prevailing theory is that this species became trapped on the island after the last ice age ended over 11,000 years ago. Rising seawater immersed the land, connecting Snake Island to the mainland. The golden lancehead is very distinct. The snake has a light yellow and light brown color, especially on its underside. Also, this snake shares the same unique head as the fer de lance, a long head with a point at the nose that resembles a lance's blade. The golden lancehead snake is one of the most venomous snakes in South America. The mortality rate for people that get anti-venom is believed to be up to 3%, and that number skyrockets if you don't get treatment. Even if the individual does not die, they will suffer severe damage to their body. The venom of a golden lancehead is hemotoxic. That means it attacks red blood cells and can cause all sorts of different physical problems. If a golden lancehead bites you, you will suffer from pain, internal bleeding, necrosis of muscle tissue, possible hemorrhages in the brain, and way too many other symptoms. There's a very famous story associated with this island where a lighthouse keeper and his family went here, and when people went to go check up on them a bit later, they were all dead from snake bites. Then a few other people tried to go here and they all died from snake bites too. Apparently this island is so dense with snakes that wherever you go, you have a high chance of getting bit. For people's safety, they obviously had to shut it down to the public. Number 2 on this list is Mezhgorye. This banned location is in Russia, and if you go here, you are probably never coming back out again. The travel says, being the largest country in the world, Russia is certainly full of surprises. Has a lot of mysterious sites, ghost towns, and other special places. Like for example, Mezhgorye in the Republic of Bashkortostan. It's a closed town hidden somewhere in the southern Ural Mountains. To keep off anyone who wants to penetrate into the town or even come close to it, it's encircled by 2 battalions. It's not 100% clear what this area is and why it's surrounded, but it's got a lot of secrecy. According to most believable reports, it's a nuclear missile site that allegedly has automatic missiles that can be controlled remotely. But since government officials don't comment anything on it, we still can't be sure what's going on there. Man, you already know that if you go anywhere close to this secret Russian base, that it is guaranteed to be the last thing you do. Also, people are just guessing it's nukes, but it honestly could be something way worse than that too. Like, this could totally be some evil human crossbreeding mutation lab or something like that. Or a place where they're just developing like super secret advanced weaponry that's just too crazy to comprehend. Whatever they are truly doing here, none of us will ever be allowed to find out because it is thoroughly off limits. And number 1 on this list is Poveglia. Poveglia is an island in Italy that has seen its fair share of death and tragedy. Mental Floss says Poveglia in Italy is deserted today, but it's been said that over the years 160,000 people have lived and died there. The Venetian island became a quarantine station in 1793, and for 2 decades it was a place for potential victims of the bubonic plague. So many people died there that up to 50% of the island's soil is said to contain human remains. The quarantine station closed in 1814, but Poveglia's dark history didn't end there. A mental hospital opened at the site in the 1920s, and it quickly developed a reputation for its inhumane treatment of patients. The hospital closed after a few decades, and today the overgrown island is largely closed off to visitors except for the occasional ghost hunters. Think about how much death has happened here. All of that death is what has led people to the conclusion that this place, it's haunted. And not just a little bit haunted, like I am talking deeply haunted. I mean, half the time that you take a step, you're gonna be walking over someone's dead body. This is just bound to be a spot of paranormal activity. The government has rightfully shut this place down. Unless you're a professional ghost hunter, you should not be visiting Poveglia.
You guys cannot get enough of haunted locations. Lucky for you, there are enough of them spread all over the world. I'm going to tell you about the horrors that have taken place, the hauntings that follow, and all of the reasons why you probably should not visit. These are the top 5 haunted locations you should never visit, part 4. Let's jump in. Coming in at number 5, we have Gibraltar Point Lighthouse in Canada. The lighthouse was built in 1808 to guide ships to Toronto's harbour from what was then a sandy peninsula until it was decommissioned in 1958. The lighthouse is the oldest one left on the Great Lakes and the second oldest in Canada. The lighthouse was there during the Battle of York in 1813 when American ships invaded the town of York, which culminated with the burning of the Parliament buildings. The British retaliated later in the War of 1812 and burned the White House down. During the war, the first lighthouse keeper, J.P. Reidmuller, a German immigrant to Upper Canada, kept watch at Gibraltar Point for enemy ships and friendly vessels returning to a safe harbour. Reidmuller disappeared under mysterious circumstances on January 2nd, 1815. The story is told that some soldiers were enjoying his homemade beer. Once drunk, they attacked Reidmuller. They then cut him up and buried him in the nearby area. No reason is known for the attack. Although the town around the lighthouse is now gone, the stories still remain, and some visitors to the land have reported some haunted sites. The current lighthouse keeper has told stories of searching for the remains of J.P. Reidmuller that were never found. Those who have visited the lighthouse have heard noises of someone walking around paired with groaning noises. Some suspect the spirit of the first keeper still watches over. Others have seen the light on from a distance even though it's been out of use for decades. Coming in at number 4, we have Yorktown Memorial Hospital in Texas. Originally built in the 1950s and managed by the Felician Sisters of the Roman Catholic Church, the Yorktown Memorial Hospital contains 2 main floors, a basement, 2 wings, a chapel, and an observation tower. The hospital closed in 1986, says current caretaker, after a new facility opened in nearby Curio. From then on, the building operated as a rehab facility, but the state closed it in 1992. Standing outside of the hospital today, it appears to be the definition of haunted. Broken windows lead into a black interior. The door is chained shut. Inside the building, a cool breeze wafts down the dark hallway. Leaves press against dusty windows and wasps crawl along the walls. Rumor has it that hundreds of patients died there due to malpractice. Since its closure, it sat there becoming a more derelict and terrifying place to enter. Naturally, it has acquired a lasting long-lasting reputation for ghosts. There are stories of patients killed by neglect or surgical mistake, and the ghost of the surgeon who is often held responsible. If you decide to enter the building and make your way to the chapel, you might come across the old surgeon. It is said he appears like a dark shadow with red eyes. If anyone tries to read anything from the Bible within the chapel, he will make screaming noises in an attempt to get you to stop. A passerby also told the story of how they looked through the chain doors at the front of the building and they saw a young man looking back at him. His skin was white and he had a bullet wound in the middle of his head with the leftover dried blood running down his face. He was startled and jumped back when he saw this. On second look, the ghost had disappeared. Everyone who visits has a number of different experiences. It is unknown just how many spirits belong here. There are many unexplained cold spots and others have feelings of dread coming and going while they walk around. The second floor is known to be home to the spirit of the nuns who originally owned the building. For some reason, they have a distaste for men with tattoos. There have been a few stories of these men being scratched or pushed over by spirits. Even with knowing all of this, the hospital has struggled with break-ins, people looking to be unauthorized ghost hunters and looking for souvenirs. If you are looking to venture into the unknown, you can pay $500 for an overnight investigation.
Number 3. Bangar Fort, India. This 17th century fortress has a reputation for being the most haunted place in India, with people refusing to build homes near the fort for fear of falling under its curse. Despite this reputation, there is some debate as to why it is haunted, with two very different stories being told. In the first story, a king named Madho Singh wanted to build the fort but needed the permission of an ascetic monk who lived on the nearby land. The monk granted him permission to build the fort, but warned him that the fort's shadow must never fall upon the monk's home. Madho agreed to these terms and built the fort to the specifications. However, one of his successors added to the fortifications vertically, causing the fort's shadow to engulf the forbidden home, causing the fort to fall to ruin and become haunted. Another version of the tale is that an evil sorcerer fell in love with a beautiful princess named Ratnavati. She rebuffed his advances, so he bewitched a cosmetic that she was going to use that would force her to fall in love with him. She found out about this scheme and poured the cosmetic onto a large boulder, which then crushed the sorcerer. With his dying breath, the sorcerer cursed the fort so that no one would ever be able to live there in peace. The fort is open to the public during the day, but it is forbidden to set foot on the property at night, as that is when the hauntings occur, with several people who have tried to disprove the ghost by staying overnight, going missing, or coming out catatonic. Number 2. The Paris Catacombs. When you consider how many locations like old houses or abandoned mental institutions have a reputation for being haunted due to the discovery of just a few bodies, it comes as no surprise that many of the world's catacombs have apparently been discovered to be haunted by specters of the past. Take for example the Paris Catacombs. Built as a mass grave in the 18th century in order to deal with the overflowing of local cemeteries, the Paris Catacombs hold the remains of millions of Parisians. A few years after being established, Louis-Étienne Héricard decided to make the catacombs a work of art by arranging the bones into elaborate displays. An inscription in the catacombs even reads, "Arrête, c'est ici l'Empire de la Mort," which translates to "Stop, this is the Empire of the Dead." Although a small section of the catacombs are available for visitors to peruse, the vast majority of the seemingly endless tunnels are banned for tourists to visit. In the years since they were constructed, there have been several reports of ghosts wandering the halls of the labyrinth-like grave, searching for a way out. As if that weren't bad enough, rumor has it that if you come into the catacombs at night, you will hear the whispers of all the spirits of the catacombs, trying to convince you to venture deeper and deeper into the catacombs until you become lost and unable to find your way out. Another often reported ghost is that of Philibert Asper, who was a doorman at the Val-de-Grâce hospital, who made his way into the catacombs in late 1793 when he was sent to fetch liquor from a cellar. With only the light of a candle to find his way out, he soon became lost and confused. It is also theorized that he was quite drunk at the time. His candle eventually went out and it became pitch black. He was missing for 11 years before his remains were found and identified due to the hospital keys and the bottle of liquor in his hand. He was interred in the catacombs at the exact location where he was found. In the years since, urban explorers calling themselves cataphiles have reported seeing the spirit of Asper wandering the halls of the catacombs with his candle on the anniversary of him going missing. The cataphiles are known for paying their respects at his grave, and they have named his spirit the protector of the cataphiles. Number 1. Poveglia Island, Italy. In the lagoon between Venice and Lido, you will find the small island known as Poveglia Poveglia. It was first inhabited in the year 421, when mainlanders relocated to the island to escape barbarian invaders. Due to its small size, the island was easily defensible, and frankly, not worth the trouble for invaders to bother attacking. The small community stayed on the island for centuries, enjoying their independence from taxes and laws of the mainland, but their population eventually dwindled, leaving the island uninhabited. This changed in the year 1348, when the bubonic plague was ravaging Venice and the surrounding towns. Poveglia became a quarantine island, with symptomatic Italians being banished there to die. The center of the island had a giant pyre, where tens of thousands of plague victims' bodies were burnt to prevent the spread of the disease. When the plague returned in the year 1630, the island became a quarantine colony, once again, with even more bodies being burnt in the town square. Naturally, the location developed a reputation for being haunted by the tens of thousands of displaced and abandoned plague victims, but the island's creepy history was far from over. Aside from a brief period where Napoleon used the island to store gunpowder, relying on the ghost stories of the place to keep unwanted visitors away, the island remained largely uninhabited until an insane asylum was built on the island in the late 1800s. It was a brutal hospital that was poorly constructed and used more to exile the patients from society than to help rehabilitate them. One of the doctors working there in the 30s conducted strange and cruel experiments on the patients for years, before going mad himself and flinging himself from the bell tower. Though this bell tower was removed years ago, people still claim to hear the sound of the bells emanating from the island. The hospital became an old folks' home briefly, but that closed in 1975, leaving the island completely abandoned. A construction crew tried to restore the hospital, but suddenly stopped, refusing to return to the island due to how intensely haunted the island has become. The government has banned anyone from visiting the island, but its reputation has made it an infamous and terrifying location.
Number 5 on this list is Goody Cole. Now, Goody Cole is a little interesting because today she is not a physical witch, but the ghost of her former witch-like self. Back in the 1600s in Hampton in the United States, Goody Cole lived with her older husband at the time. Once 1656 rolled around though, she didn't live with him anymore. Goody Cole was arrested and found guilty of witchcraft. It was said that she had a mumbling habit, looked extremely witch-like, and also had some animal-related deaths tracked back to her in what would have been used for apparent rituals. It was also said that she was capable of turning herself into an animal and would often do so to disguise herself and trick others. When she was arrested, she was treated extremely poorly, often tortured, starved, and this whole process went on for years. After 6 years of this, she petitioned to be released so that she could support her husband, who was close to death at the time. The court agreed that they would let her do this, but she had to pay a sizable fee that she obviously didn't have access to because she was in jail. Her husband eventually died alone without the support of his wife, something that was said to eat at Goody's conscience continually. Now, the manner of Goody Cole's death is sort of up in the air. Some say that she was stabbed with a stake for being a witch, others say that she was finally released, but she was so old that she died in her home alone soon after, whereas some people say that she just died in prison. But one thing's for certain, Goody Cole was so unhappy with the people of Hampton actually that she never left. Many people in the area have reported in the older parts of town that they still see a dark, shadowy figure resembling an old woman. A phantom all in white that stalks people through the streets and can be seen in the windows looking down upon you as you walk through the city. People believe that this witch won't cause you any harm, but her goal is to make you feel as ostracized as possible, the exact way that she was made to feel back when she was still living. Number 4 on this list are the Boo Hags. Typically associated with the haunting of the coastal plains of South Carolina, it should be noted that there's no reason to believe that they could only be limited to this area, but there has been a large amount of activity of them here. Now, I should also note that the jury is still a little bit out on if these creatures are exclusively witches or exclusively vampires. I think that the truth of the matter is probably a horrifying mixture of both. Legend says that the Boo Hag needs to get sustenance from a person's breath, and that's how they sustain themselves. This action is somewhat similar to how the Dementors act in Harry Potter, but still with some notable differences. For starters, a Boo Hag is a fleshy creature that does not have any skin of its own. Therefore, it is simply a red tendon-esque humanoid being. Because they don't have any skin of their own, they will often steal the skin of their victims and fit it to their bodies until that skin inevitably deteriorates. The action of sucking someone's breath isn't as simple as my Harry Potter example either. Typically, once a buheg finds a suitable victim, they will stalk that individual back to their home and wait until they're sleeping. Once they're passed out, the buheg will break into their home and straddle the person who is asleep. This action is referred to by locals as a riding from a buheg. Now, if the person wakes during this process and struggles, they will steal your skin and leave you for dead, but oftentimes you don't even realize that this is happening to you. They will suck your energy and it will put you into a deep catatonic-like state. After they've gotten their necessary energy, they'll leave you alone, and you'll wake the next morning feeling drowsy, most likely, not even realizing that you were ridden from a buheg.
In at number 3, we have the Alaskan Hotel in Alaska. Built in 1913 during the gold rush, the Alaskan Hotel is the oldest hotel in the area. The hotel was built to be a luxury experience for those passing by, as they advertised as a pocket version of the finest hostelry on the west coast. The high fashion and glitz were a paltry concealment for the legal prostitution and sale of illicit substances that went on there throughout its history. The hotel overcame many issues that it faced since opening, one being the 1980 imposition of bone-dry prohibition. They turned their bar into a cafe serving soda while also running a speakeasy like most of the previous bars at the time. The Alaskan Hotel was a brothel twice in her history, first legally and second not legal in 1977, which was shut down by the fire marshal. There is one main soul who inhabits the Alaskan Hotel today, and that is a gold miner's wife. She lived at the hotel while waiting for him to return. When he did not return, she began to support herself through prostitution. But then he did return. When he returned to his wife, he was furious with what she had been doing and then murdered her in the hotel. There have since been a number of sightings of her at the hotel. She is said to be very angry and restless. When she is around, the air goes cold, and some have reported hearing footsteps wandering the halls. Some even hear crying coming from the walls, but it is unclear where the noise is coming from. There is also a number of abandoned mines located near the town, so if you're looking for ghosts, this is the place to be. Coming in at number 2, we have City of the Dead, North Ossetia, Russia. Not many people have been to the City of the Dead. It is a dangerous and long journey to reach the village. There are also myths and legends warning that those who do reach the city never return. Reaching this mystifying destination requires a 3-hour drive, taking you down a dangerous and hidden road. It is located in North Ossetia in Russia. If you do manage to reach the city, you will come across many white huts that look like houses. However, they are not. These are actually stone crypts. It is said that in the 18th century a plague hit the city, leaving no one behind. The clans built quarantine houses for the sick. They would bring the food but not the freedom to move about until death claimed their lives. The even sadder side is that people who did not have family to build the hut or bring them food simply went to the large graveyard and simply waited for death. It was a very slow and painful way to go. For those who dared to visit the city, a little well was created outside of each home. If you drop a coin in the well and you hear it hit the stone at the bottom, then the person who died here went to heaven. If you do not hear a noise, then this indicates that the spirit did not pass on and may still be in the village. My advice would be, don't visit the city. We don't need an 18th century disease. And lastly, in at number 1, we have Craigdarroch Castle in Victoria, British Columbia. What first appears to be a beautiful castle is actually a haunted home with a tragic past. The Craigdarroch Castle was built in the 1800s as a home for a wealthy family, coal industrialist Robert Dunsmuir and his wife Joan. It was built over 2,300 meters and comprises 39 rooms. However, Robert died 17 months before the construction was completed. The original architect of the castle, Warren Hayward Williams, also unfortunately died before the finalization of the home. His son James and Alexander decided to finish the castle after their father's death. Robert's death caused a lot of trouble within the family. His sons James and Alex were disappointed that their father's business and assets had been left to their mother. They claimed that they had an oral agreement from their father that they would receive the family business. For the following years, they tried countlessly to get the family business from their mother, and after 7 years they finally received the title to the San Francisco Company. Feeling financially stable, Alex finally married his partner of 20 years, Josephine. However, their marriage only lasted 6 weeks as he died on their honeymoon in New York. When he died, the family was torn apart once more over his will. Joan and James fought for years, going to the highest court level. They did not speak during the legal battle, and then finally Joan passed away in 1908 in Craigdarroch Castle in Victoria, where she lived for 18 years. It was believed that James wouldn't attend her funeral, funeral. However, he did at last. The house has now been taken over by the Craigdarroch Castle Historical Museum Society. There have been many ghost stories presumed to be connected to the Dunsmuir family. One of the main spectres is a woman who walks down the main staircase in a ball gown. No one has seen her in any other part of the castle, and she never goes up the stairs. Could it be the ghost of Joan going to greet her husband? In the basement of the home there have been sightings of a little girl crying, although they disappear if she hears anyone approaching. There have been multiple sightings of her. She is believed to be the youngest daughter of Robert, who died just months after he did. As well as these sightings, there have also been other weird goings on around the castle. Often people hear the crying of a child from various parts of the castle. Objects would also move on their own when no one was around. Some can also hear a piano being played in the dining room when no one is present, but there is no piano in the castle. It seems there are many ghosts of the Dunsmuir family within the castle walls who don't want to leave their home.
Number 5 on this list is Heard Island. Heard Island is actually part of Australia, even though it is super far away from Australia. The Travel says one of the most remote territories in the world, Heard Island is considered an Australian territory even though it's located between Madagascar and Antarctica. It's home to a wide range of animals such as seals, penguins, and marine birds, as well as more than 40 glaciers. There were a few reasons for closing the island to the public. First, in 2000, researchers noticed a huge lava flow coming from the island's massive volcano called Mawson's Peak. Second, Heard Island is known for its poor weather conditions. And third, it's too remote to be safe. Judge it by yourself, it's located in a minimum 2-week sail to the closest major landmass. So yeah, there are obviously tons of reasons not to go to this place and very few reasons to actually go. And the few reasons to actually go, it would be pretty cool to go to a place that's totally remote like this. There'd be a lot of penguins and seals and stuff, and for about a solid half hour you would think it's pretty cool. After that half hour though, I don't think that you'd be about it. The weather is horrible here and it's going to be extremely cold, so you could easily get swept up in a bad storm that would make it impossible to leave the island. This is also one of the better case scenarios because alternatively you could have the volcano erupt. On the bright side, you wouldn't be cold anymore if that happened, but you'd also be very dead. I also looked at some pictures of this place online, and honestly guys, there really isn't that much to it. Like, if the place was like picturesque and there was beautiful stuff here, then I could see an argument for it, but that's actually just not the case. Like, it's kind of just a small plot of land in the middle of nowhere. And even by looking at the photos, I felt like I was getting cold. The island is banned for a reason, so stay away guys. Number 4 on this list is Monkey Island. As far as islands packed with animals, you're going to see that this isn't actually the scariest one on the list, but still, it's pretty dangerous. The Travel says a colony of approximately 4,000 rhesus monkeys live on Morgan Island, South Carolina, due to which it was nicknamed as Monkey Island. But despite what you might think, the population of primates isn't native to the island. They were relocated there from Puerto Rico due to the spreading of herpes virus B infection. Before it happened, the island was uninhabited. These days, people are prohibited by law to visit the island for their own safety as well as the safety of the monkeys. Only a handful of researchers from the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases can go there. So herpes virus B is very dangerous, guys. A lot of people think herpes and think of cold sores and, well, not a major deal, but herpes virus B, that is a very rare infection that can lead to permanent brain damage or death if you don't seek doctor's help immediately. So basically, this island is filled with a bunch of monkeys who, by themselves, could be very dangerous because they could attack us at any time, but also a lot of these monkeys happen to carry a very dangerous infection. So for good reason, the government has completely banned people from going. If you care about your health and safety, you should listen to them. Number 3 on this list is the Five Fishermen Restaurant. This is a restaurant in Halifax, Nova Scotia, known for its exceptional oysters and also its ghostly inhabitants. The ground that this restaurant sits on wasn't always utilized for serving up fish and chips though. In fact, it has a very long history. In the early 1800s is when the building went up, and for a long time it acted as the town's only school. Nothing ghoulish or demonic about that. However, at around the turn of the century, the school moved, and the building took on a new purpose. It became the mortuary for Halifax and made its dealings with the dead. Now, not every mortuary is going to become haunted, but this one had quite a lot to deal with over the years. In 1912, the unsinkable ship, the Titanic, sunk. It sunk roughly 640 kilometers off of the eastern shores of Canada, and therefore the closest places to assist with the rescue was these eastern provinces. Halifax acted as the leader in these rescue processes, and because of that, the mortuary had an onslaught of bodies of people whom had died on the ship. 5 years after that tragedy, Halifax incurred one of their own with the massive Halifax explosion. This was where a munitions ship exploded, and it killed roughly 2,000 people just like that. This mortuary served as the primary designation for both of these incidents, and due to the unnatural deaths here, it makes sense that some spirits have clung on. Guests and employees alike have reported seeing ghosts all over this mortuary that turned restaurant. One of the dishwashers reported running out of the restaurant when he looked up from what he was doing and was staring directly at a ghost-like specter. The restaurant has attempted to have serious renovations done. However, I don't think that any amount of structural change will get these spirits to rest for good. Number 2 on this list is the Frank Slide. Now, even though the Frank Slide sounds like it could be a fun, popular dance move that takes over TikTok for a few weeks, it is far more morbid than that. On April 29th in 1903, in the mining town of Frank, which at that time was part of the Northwest Territories, but it is now a section of Alberta, there was a horrible tragedy. 110 million tons of limestone and rock came tumbling down in one of Canada's biggest landslides ever. This fell onto part of the town of Frank. Frank was located right next to Turtle Mountain, which after extensive mining had grown unstable. On April 29th, it all came crashing down and claimed the lives of 70 to 90 people. It is still to this day Canada's most deadly landslide to ever occur in history, and was a horrible tragedy that can only remind us how fleeting life can be. I think the craziest part about this landslide as well is that it wasn't just miners who were killed. Their wives, their families, all of them died at the hands of the Frank Slide. The remains of these bodies were never recovered either, as the damage from the slide was far too devastating. Where all of this happened is now a section of a town called Crow's Nest Pass, and over a century later, the ghosts of the dead still haunt the area. This place is somewhere where visitors have reported feeling very unsafe. They say that the overall feelings of uneasiness are almost too much to bear and that they have to leave. Cries, howls, screams, this can all be heard late at night as you're trying to sleep. Lanterns will be seen in the night walking around at the hands of unknown apparitions. It is basically a full ghost town of people who never deserved to die in the first place, all wanting to get a second just to feel their lives again as they were so unfairly ripped away from them. Definitely one of Canada's most horrific tragedies, and now home to one of its most haunted locations. Number 1 on this list is the Banff Springs Hotel. This hotel is located in Banff, Alberta, and is truly one of the creepiest places that I've ever read about. Now, first off, I want to note the hotel itself looks gorgeous on the outside. The beautiful nature it is surrounded by is stunning, and the hotel gives me some serious Harry Potter Hogwarts vibes. However, when I say that this place is surrounded by nature, I really mean it. It is totally out on its own, with no other buildings in sight at all. The secluded site has been around for 132 years and has housed its fair share of visitors. Some of these visitors have had some incredible stays. I mean, when you look it up online, the hotel has a 4.7 Google rating, so I mean, it's pretty freaking good. Some of the guests, though, they never checked out. In the 1920s, a couple was set to have their wedding at this hotel. On the day of the ceremony, though, the bride, while she was walking down one of the hotel's beautiful marble staircases, tripped and fell, smacking her head on her descent and dying on the spot. This bride's spirit is one of the most notable sightings people have had when they're staying at this hotel. It's said that they often see a phantom in a wedding dress ascending and descending the stairs very quickly. She's also been seen in the ballroom dancing alone, potentially dreaming of the dance that she wanted so desperately to have with the husband that she never got to marry. In 1975, a longtime bellman of the hotel, Sam, died there. Since then, sightings of Sam have been pretty consistent. One story details how 2 women lost their room key and called the front desk to go and get it. The front desk person sent someone to go and open their room for these ladies. When that person had got there though, the ladies were already in the room and said that another bellman had let them in. They described Sam to a T when they spoke about the bellman who helped them out. Instances like this have occurred time and time again at the hotel, with many people believing his spirit is still working there. Finally, with this hotel, you have room 873. Room 873 is rumored to be the home of a gruesome murder. One evening, a family was staying there and the father, for some unknown reason, lost his mind, murdering his family and himself. After completely refurbishing the room, the hotel put it back in service, but now people who have stayed there report hearing the screams and the cries as if they were still dying. If you have to stay at this hotel, definitely avoid room 873.
Number 5. North Brother Island, New York. The North Brother Island is one of 2 small islands located in the East River of New York City. The island remained uninhabited until 1885, with the only trace of humanity being a small lighthouse that was erected in 1869. The island began seeing more use in 1885 when the Riverside Smallpox Hospital moved from Roosevelt Island to North Brother, when their mission expanded to treating and isolating victims of other quarantinable diseases such as typhoid, tuberculosis, and especially polio. In 1904, a steamship called the General Slocum was set ablaze, and over 1,000 people perished, either from the fire or from drowning while trying to escape, and ended up washing ashore on the island. Of course, many people have reported seeing a ghostly steamship in the years since, and sightings of the spectral victims of the fire are reported from afar, with them wandering the beach of the island, seemingly lost and in pain. One of the most famous residents at the hospital was Mary Mallon, otherwise known as Typhoid Mary, who was confined on the island for 20 years until her death in 1938, after being declared a public health menace for infecting between 51 and 122 people while working as a cook. As public health measures like vaccines began to be adopted in the 30s and 40s, the need for a quarantine hospital lessened to the point where the hospital was closed. It was converted into housing for war veterans who were going to school in the city following World War II, before being converted into a rehabilitation facility for young people suffering from substance abuse issues. But it was closed in 1963 due to the cost of upkeep and the widespread corruption of the staff. In the years since, it was considered for a variety of purposes, including housing for the homeless and an extension of the jail at Rikers Island, but the danger of the unmarked manholes and the advanced dilapidation of the buildings, which are mostly collapsed and overrun by poison ivy, resulted in such ideas being abandoned. It was eventually decided that the site would serve as a bird sanctuary for herons and other wading shorebirds. Although many of the original 25 buildings are still standing in some shape or form, it has been made off limits to the public and is only available for supervised visits for those intending to go ashore for, quote, compelling academic and scientific purposes. With its history of confinement and death, perhaps it is for the best that this site has been deemed unfit for public visitation, although the history of the island is indeed compelling. Number 4. Boble Island Amusement Park, Ontario. North America has no shortage of amusement parks for families and thrill seekers alike to visit. The Canadian province of Ontario has several to choose from, including Canada's Wonderland, Great Wolf Lodge, and Splashdown Niagara. One theme park that you won't be able to buy a ticket for, however, is the Boble Island Amusement Park, located on the island of Bois Blanc, just above the mouth of the Detroit River. The park was opened in 1898 and used a ferry system to service guests from Ontario and Detroit and bring them to the island, where they had a variety of attractions to keep them occupied and having fun. Some of these included the Falling Star, a log flume, a theater, a sky tower, Ferris wheel, a zoo, a carousel, and a dance hall, financed by Henry Ford. It also had 3 roller coasters, the Screamer, the Nightmare, and the Sky Streak. It also had Boblo's Scootaboats, which were essentially aquatic bumper cars. The park operated for many years before eventually closing down for financial reasons in late 1993. There are still ferries that operate in order to get island residents on and off the island, but the now abandoned amusement park has been declared off limits by the property owners. Of course, the dilapidated carousel building, dance pavilion, and sky Sky Tower have since proven to be too appealing for urban explorers to keep away from, and the eerie, overgrown site still sees a variety of visitors. Like any good amusement park, it of course has a reputation for being haunted by a variety of ghosts. My personal favorite of the ghost stories is the story of Smiley the Magician. Back when the theater still operated and showed a variety of different performers, one of the most consistently booked performers of the 30s and 40s was a magician named Smiley Smilovich. Smiley was an old-school magician who had trained with Houdini in the late 20s and was known for his seemingly death-defying tricks. One of his most famous tricks was a metamorphosis trick, where he would put a trunk on stage, climb into it, lock it, and then have the trunk set on fire. He would escape through a trap door, the trunk would burn away, revealing that he had escaped, and the crowd would go wild. One day he was doing this trick as usual, but when he locked himself in the trunk, he had a heart attack and died. The trunk was then set on fire, and the audience was left in terror as Smiley's body burned in front of them. Ever since then, Smiley's ghost would apparently haunt the theater, being sighted watching shows that were performed there, showing a special interest in magic shows. In the years since the park's closure, the occasional rumor of the magician being spotted has come up from the various urban explorers checking out the overgrown buildings. Would you ever be brave enough to explore Boble Island Amusement Park? And if you did, would you be on the lookout for spectral magicians?
Number 3 on this list is the Rue de Chantrey. This is considered by most to be the most haunted streets in France. It's located in Paris on the island and is right next to the Notre Dame Cathedral. This street is said to be haunted by the ghosts of many children. As with most ghost stories, this didn't come out of thin air, but from a horrible tragedy that took place on this street just over 100 years ago. In the early 1900s, there was a hotel that was located on this street. This hotel didn't really act as a hotel though, because during that time there was a massive outbreak of tuberculosis. The children in the area who had come down with the disease were sent to this hotel to quarantine. They were locked in the bedrooms of this hotel and couldn't leave at any point for risk of infecting other people. Some children died during these quarantines, which is already bad, but the main tragedy happened roughly a decade later in 1910. In 1910, there was a great flood of Paris where the river Seine overflowed and flooded the city. All the children that were currently locked inside their bedrooms at this time drowned during that flood. Nobody knows for sure the exact number of children who died in this tragedy, but it was certainly enough to make a spiritual imprint on the street. Now their souls go without rest and live along this street. People have heard the laughter and also the crying of children. They have heard the muffled screams as if they're screaming through water. They've also seen these children before peering out at them from around corners, looking extremely sad and lonely. The spot acts as an attraction for supernatural hunters, but a landmark that I wouldn't recommend visiting. Number 2 on this list is Mont Saint-Michel. Mont Saint-Michel is one of the most beautiful and unique castles on the entire planet, in my opinion. How it's constructed and where it's located, it almost doesn't even seem like something out of real life. This castle is located off of the Normandy coast, and the only connection that it has to France is a road that goes underwater when it's high tide. How this place got made has a bit of a supernatural story to it. Apparently, the archangel Michael appeared to Saint Aubert in a dream and told him to start building here. When he resisted, Michael burned a hole right in his head. After this incident, the castle began its construction, and it took quite a while to become the beauty that we have today. It was a work in progress, with more things being added over the years. Now, because of this castle's location directly in the water, it is extremely hard to attack and was never captured during the 100 Years' War. During said war, one of the major commanders of this castle was Louis d'Estourville. His ghost is one of the most common sightings at this place. He apparently is responsible for the killing of thousands of English soldiers and had battles that were so deadly the water around them would turn red with blood. He's said to patrol the castle and act as a watchman of sorts for intruders and people posing a threat. Similar to our previous entry of the horse, one of his main objectives is to keep the castle safe. He isn't the only ghost at this spot though. The ghosts of monks can also be seen praying and meditating at this location. For a long time, this castle housed several hundred monks until they were ultimately kicked out from the space. Their spirits still linger in this place though, although they aren't nearly as frightening as the weathered war general, in my opinion. Number 1 on this list is the Paris Catacombs. The Paris Catacombs is unlike anything else on the entire planet and is the breeding ground for scary stories. These catacombs are a collection of tunnels that are underneath the city of Paris and stretch for over 2,000 acres. The tunnels act as an underground cemetery where they house over 6 million dead bodies. This is one of the largest collections of the dead in the entire world, and if that wasn't enough, you can actually see their skulls as they all line the walls. These catacombs are extremely difficult to navigate. Seeing as there are over 2,000 acres of them and it's underground, people have reported getting extremely lost when they're trying to explore them. This is part of the reason why only a portion of them are open to the public today. But all of this has led to a plethora of ghost stories and legends over the years. For instance, in 2004, a group of police officers were investigating an area of the catacombs that was closed to the public, and they came upon something unexpected. A bar, a living room, a workshop, and a meeting area for over 20 people, they were all found. This was alongside a PA system, a camera system recording the area, and a pirated means of electricity. All of this was more than suspicious, but when the officers returned a few days later with some more people, everything was gone, except for a note that read, "Don't search." This isn't all there is to the catacombs though. In the 1990s, a group was searching through them and found a video camera lying on the ground. They picked it up and examined it and saw that there was a recording. The recording was clearly of a man who was very lost in the catacombs and extremely frantic. Scary voices could be heard in the background, and the heavy breathing of this man indicated his panic. Finally, the camera fell to the ground and we could hear the man scream. These are just 2 of the more famous stories to come from these catacombs, but so many other ones of ghosts or demons haunting the area have come from this place. If you were to ever go here, then make sure you have a strong sense of direction and a flashlight, because the last thing you would want is to get lost in an underground haunted graveyard.
Coming in at number 5, we have Chateau de Brissac, France. Chateau de Brissac is a French chateau located in the Brissac-Quince areas of the commune of Brissac-Lory-au-Bois. That's the best we're getting. The property is owned by the Brissac family, with the head bearing the title of the Duke of Brissac. It also has a very unique history, with King Louis XIII and his mother Marie de Medici meeting in 1620 to discuss their neutral territory of the chateau. However, these talks didn't last long, with the Queen Mother being banished. Now, according to locals, the chateau is best known as being the home of the Green Lady. She is said to be the ghost of King Charles VII's illegitimate daughter, Charlotte of France. History tells that Charlotte was killed by her husband after he caught her having an affair, and the outfit she was killed in was a green dress, hence the name, the Green Lady. According to visitors, she is often reported to be roaming the chapel's tower room, and has also been heard moaning in the early hours. As of today, the chateau is open to the general public for tours and even overnight stays in the guest rooms, with its theatre hosting the annual Val de Lory festival. However, if you do opt to stay the night inside of its walls, just keep an eye out for the Green Lady. Coming in at number 4, we have the Toll Booth from Aberdeen, UK. Located in Aberdeen, Scotland, the Toll Booth is the oldest building in the city, constructed between the years of 1616 and 1629, with it being attached to the Aberdeen Sheriff Court on Union Street. The Toll Booth is a former jail which now operates as a museum. However, like everything else on our list, it is reported as being one of the most haunted places in the world. As I said, the Toll Booth was constructed as a prison, even housing Aberdeen's first guillotine for the criminals, with it still on display there today for the public to view. In 1630, a woman by the name of Marion Hardy became a prisoner at Toll Booth for supposedly practicing witchcraft, and it was in the Toll Booth that she suffered quite a brutal death, with her being strangled and burned in front of a watching crowd. In the mid-1700s, it later became a place where children were housed before being sent off to live in American colonies. Now, for a place that witnessed so many murders, executions, and torture, it should come as no surprise that it is reported to be incredibly haunted, with it even catching the attention of paranormal investigators, including the television series Most Haunted. Visitors to the prison museum have reported hearing chains rattling, footsteps, keys, as well as spotting a 4-foot-tall man wearing 1920s attire. Very spooky indeed.
Number 3, the Driscoll Hotel. The Driscoll Hotel is another shining spot in the state, said to be a hotbed of paranormal activity. Lone Star State, Lone Scare State, more like. With how many ghosts are said to live in this place, it's hard to imagine imagine that you'd even be able to get a free room. One of the more notable ones is the owner, the cowboy Jesse Driscoll himself, who built the place originally. Shortly after the hotel's construction, it said that Jesse came under very hard times. So, desperate for money, Jesse gambled away the deed to the hotel in a game of cards, and was forever swallowed by this guilt, losing his cherished prize. It's said his spirit still resides in this hotel, in the room looking out at 6th Street and Brazos. A consultant once reported looking out of the window in this room and seeing a man dressed in old western attire, puffing a cigar, asking, "Hey fella, what are you doing in my room?" When he flicked the lights on and off to make sure he wasn't seeing what he thought he'd seen, the varmint disappeared, leaving behind only a trail of smoke. Another notable ghost guests like to talk about is the Bride, the ghost of a distraught woman who ended her life in the early 1990s after her wedding was called off, as she blew through all her money in a desperate coping attempt. I get it. Guests say that they see her ghost towing bags up and down the halls of the hotel, still running mad. Now I'll leave you with one last good spooky story out of the Driscoll. There was actually so many for this one. Definitely read up on it at home or visit if you're nearby. It seems like there's a lot going on. There's a painting on the 5th floor. It's a painting of a little girl holding a bouquet of flowers in one hand and a letter in the other. Paranormal enthusiasts claim that this painting is the daughter of a US senator who passed away in a freak accident at the hotel, and her spirit lingers on in the canvas. Guests claim that they can feel something tugging at their coats or legs when they walk on by. Oof, it's a little too interactive for me for an art experience. Number 2, the Oakwood Cemetery. I gotta say, a cemetery is a pretty classical location for something haunted to be happening. I think we all sort of suspect most cemeteries are haunted as is. I mean, a couple thousand dead bodies all buried underneath the same plot makes my hair stand on end. I said I was gonna try not to do a southern drawl, but I swear it's coming on naturally. I'm sorry. Oakwood Cemetery in particular is well known as a haunted spot to those who believe. It was established sometime in the 1850s, though it's thought that earlier settlers were laid to rest there too. With 23,000 souls resting there, it's no surprise that there is a litany of spooky stories amongst the tombstones. Take a listen to some of the more notable ones I dug up for you. One in particular that gets retold is that of Eula Phillips, a young woman who was struck fatally with an axe on Christmas Eve. Not that there's ever a good day for that, but that's a pretty bad one. Her husband was found guilty, only to be exonerated later when it turned out that there was a series of victims all around the same area matching her profile. 8 others who all fell victim to this is unbelievable that any newspaper ever printed this name, the Servant Girl Annihilator. I cannot believe they named him that. I've actually featured him in a video before. I can't quite remember the title of it, but click through on every single top 5 scary video until you find it. There are some theorists who suspect the Servant Girl Annihilator and the infamous Jack the Ripper are one and the same, and that guy just could not get enough traveling from country to country. Some local residents claim that Eula's ghost roams the cemetery, lost, afraid, and panicked, unable to come to terms with the vile means of her death. Another very notable ghost is that of Susanna Dickinson. When Lopez de Santa Anna attacked the Alamo, Susanna and her kin were brought into the garrison. The dust cleared and the battle was over, and Susanna met with Santa Anna, where he offered to take her and her children back to Mexico, but she declined, knowing it might even cost her her life. Surprised, Santa Anna spared her, and her account of the Alamo was crucial to understanding and remembering what happened there. Susanna was buried at a plot in Oakwood, and visitors say she constantly appears to strangers, telling her stories all these years on, still remembering the Alamo. And number 1, Yorktown Memorial Hospital. About 80 miles southeast of San Antonio is Yorktown, a small community with a population that barely exceeds a couple thousand. Probably a good reason for that, because if the legends are to be believed, the hauntings at the Yorktown Memorial Hospital might be keeping people away. The hospital was built in 1951, where it operated for a bit, and was eventually took over by the Felician Sisters of the Roman Catholic Church, who kept the place running until late 1986 when it was abandoned, where it still sits today, almost as if nothing's happened. It looks like everybody just packed up and left. It's said that over 2,000 people call Yorktown their final resting spot, with 500 of those all occurring during the small tenure of the nuns running the hospital. These days, of course, the hospital's sickly lime green walls don't really see a lot of patients. Mostly just ghost hunters and seekers of the paranormal looking for something lurking left behind. And if the stories are true, this place is filled with restless ghosts. Explorers report everything from disembodied voices to sounds of wheelchairs creaking, mysterious flashes of lights, orbs, mists, cold chills, you know, the usual who's who greatest hits of haunted spots. Now, you don't even need to be told this place is haunted to worry about it. I mean, just look at it. The place looks like it's straight out of Silent Hill, down to the rusted pipes and leaky hallways, but don't fret, no, there are ghosts. One in particular is that of a late surgeon, one Leon Norirski. He was infamous around the hospital for his sloppy handiwork, and was said to have lost a number of patients in his time, and his spirit as such has been cursed to wander the facilities endlessly. Keeps writing terrifying messages on the wall, but no one can read them because he's a doctor. That's not my best work. I'm really sorry. Some of these should have stayed on the writing board. Another infamous ghost is that of Sally, a young girl who's said to still live in the hospital's halls, heard happily playing, jovially dancing around, and even asking explorers to read her favorite story when she encounters them. I hope someone takes her up on that. Not me though, nothing personal. I just have like a policy about not reading stories to ghosts.
Coming in at 5, the Sultan's Palace. At 716 Dauphine Street in the French quarter of New Orleans stands a 4-story home housing one of the most unusual yet terrifying ghosts, the Sultan. Built in 1836 by Jean-Baptiste Laprette, a plantation owner who rented out his city home when he was experiencing a shortage of cash. However, the man he rented it out to was a little odd. His name was Prince Suleiman, a Turk who claimed to be the Sultan of a Mid-Eastern country. He had many wives and family members as well as slaves and servants. Now things started to get a little weird when folks began reporting that not only did the Sultan's harem consist of many women but also young boys, with stories of orgies and kidnappings quickly surfacing. However, things took a truly gruesome turn when a passing neighbor made an early morning discovery. They noticed the house was particularly quiet and saw blood dripping from the gallery oozing out of the front door. He contacted the police, and what they found would haunt them forever. Body parts were strewn all over the house, which was also covered in blood. Women, children and guards were slaughtered and beheaded. However, there was one body that had been left untouched. The Sultan. He had been buried alive with one hand reaching up through the dirt, almost as if he was trying to claw his way out. The identity of the murderer still remains a mystery to this day, and as of today, his angry spirit is said to roam the home, creating unusual noises, playing loud music, as well as making unwelcome advances on passing female residents. Coming in at 4, the Queen Mary, Long Beach, California. The RMS Queen Mary is a retired British ocean liner that sailed the North Atlantic Ocean between 1936 and 1967 for the Cunard White Star Line. She was built by John Brown and Company in Scotland along with RMS Queen Elizabeth, with the ships being built as a planned 2-ship weekly express service between Southampton and New York. However, with the outbreak of the Second World War, Queen Mary was converted into a troop ship and ferried Allied soldiers during the war. Following that, she was refitted as a passenger service before retiring completely in 1967, during which time she sailed from Southampton to the port of Long Beach, California, where she remains permanently moored. However, since that day, claims have been made that the ship is haunted, with Time magazine including it among its top 10 haunted places. According to some reports, one of the staterooms is alleged to be haunted by the spirit of a person murdered there, supposedly anyway. The Queen Mary also explicitly promotes Suite Room B340, which was a former third-class cabin as, I quote, notoriously haunted. Many ghost tours take place in the ship, including Dark Harbor, which operates during Halloween. As it stands, up to 50 deaths have been logged on the Queen Mary, which truly makes her one of the most haunted ships in history. Coming in at number 3, Castle of Good Hope in South Africa. This oldest colonial building in South Africa, the Castle of Good Hope, is a pentagonal fortress built by Dutch colonialists in the 17th century. The well-known landmark is central to the history of Cape Town, having served as the seat of government and military operations for 2 centuries. The first ghost was spotted in 1915 when the apparition of a tall gentleman was seen jumping off the side of one of the castle walls and then walking between the bastions Leerdam and Orange. The other famous ghost who walked the grounds was the Lady in Grey. It is not known exactly who she is, but she would be seen hysterically crying into her hands and running around the castle. She used to be seen frequently by those on the grounds. However, during one of those renovations of the castle, the remains of a woman were uncovered and removed. Since these were removed, the woman has not been seen. It seems she was waiting for her remains to be found. Maybe her death was a sinister attack covered up and her body was lost until that day. The castle today has 3 museums and often tours of the old buildings. Be careful if you visit though, as it appears the spirits who have existed there were not happy ones. Coming in at number 2, Hellfire Club in Ireland. The Hellfire Club was a hunting lodge built in 1925 for William Connolly, an Irish parliamentary speaker. The stones of the buildings are from ancient passage tombs said to have angered the devil, which first associated the site with the supernatural. The lodge reportedly became a gathering place for a small group of Dublin elites who met for debauchery and devil worship. Its ruins sit atop the summit of Montpellier Hill in the foothills of the Dublin Mountains. Most who stumble upon the Hellfire Club today will assume it is nothing more than an old derelict building, but it has a long past full of horrific tales. Tales of animal sacrifice, black masses, cloven-hoofed men and murder are linked to the structure. The most popular tales tells of a visit by a satanic creature, in the form of a man who was only discovered when one of the players dropped a card and on picking it up noticed the guest had cloven feet. On his discovery, the creature disappeared in a ball of flames. One well-known ghost at the club is that of a young lady. It is said that she crossed paths with the club during one of their dark meetings. She was then thrown into a barrel, set on fire and rolled down the hill for fun. Her spirit stayed, possibly to warn others not to enter and meet the same fate. And finally, coming in at number 1, we have Poveglia Island in Italy. Poveglia is a small island located between Venice and Lido in the Venetian Lagoon, northern Italy. A small canal divides the island into 2 separate parts. The island first appeared in the historical record in 421. In the 14th century, Venetians infected by the bubonic plague were sent here to die, and when they died, they were burned on giant pyres. The site was also used as a mental asylum during the 1800s, where patients were experimented on and tortured. If you ask any of the locals, they will all agree that the island is cursed with unhealthy spirits. Voices and screams can often be heard, and visitors see dark figures. Many visitors say they begin to feel an oppressive, evil feeling as soon as they step on the island. Currently, the island is abandoned. No one steps foot on it for any reason. Even if you did want to visit, you would struggle to find anyone willing to take you. The locals know the island to be evil and refuse to get anywhere close to it. Fishermen even avoid fishing in the area surrounding the island out of fear of accidentally finding and disturbing human remains. It's probably for the best that you don't visit this haunted location unless you're really determined, but that never ends well in horror movies. Coming in at number 5, Hill of Crosses in Lithuania. Located in Lithuania, the Hill of Crosses is a site of pilgrimage about 12 kilometers north of the city of Šiauliai. Now, the precise origin of the crosses is unknown, but it is believed that the first crosses were placed on the former Diamante Hill fort after the 1831 uprising. The uprising was of course known as the Polish-Russian War and was an armed rebellion in the heartland of partitioned Poland against the Russian Empire. Ever since then, not only crosses and crucifixes, but also statues of the Virgin Mary have appeared on the Hill of Crosses, as well as carvings of Lithuanian patriots, and thousands upon thousands of tiny effigies and rosaries have been brought here by Catholic pilgrims. Now, as you would expect, the exact number of all these items is unknown, but it is estimated to range between 50,000 to 100,000. Over the years, the place has come to signify the peaceful endurance of Lithuanian Catholicism despite the threats it faced throughout history. Throughout history, the Hill of Crosses has been used as a place for Lithuanians to pray for peace for their country and for the loved ones they had lost during the wars of independence. The hill eventually became a place of defiance once again during Soviet occupation from 1944 to 1991. The hill and crosses were bulldozed by Soviets 3 times, but locals kept rebuilding it. So sweet. In at number 4, Myrtles Plantation, USA. The Myrtles Plantation is a historic home and former antebellum plantation in St. Francisville, Louisiana. Built in 1976, it is considered to be one of America's most haunted homes, with a variety of legends surrounding the plantation. Now, one of the reasons Myrtles is believed to be so damn haunted is because it is rumored to be on top of an ancient Tunica Indian burial ground. As of right now, it is currently a bed and breakfast and offers historical and mystery tours. As I previously mentioned though, it is considered to be one of the most haunted homes in the United States, with it rumored to be home to at least 12 ghosts, and is often reported that 10 murders occurred in the house, but historical records only indicate the murder of 1, William Winter. William Drew Winter is also a very popular character in the plantation. He was an attorney who lived in the home before being shot by a stranger. It has been said that after he was shot, he staggered inside the home and died trying to climb the stairs. He died on the 17th step. Even today, visitors still claim to hear his dying footsteps. In at number 3 we have Myrtle's Plantation in St. Francisville, Louisiana. The plantation was built in 1796. The house is reportedly built over an Indian burial ground, which is never a good sign. The original owner and architect of the Myrtle's Plantation was General David Bradford. He purchased 600 acres of land and built an 8-bedroom home on the property, naming it Laurel Ridge. When David died, his property was passed down to his daughter Sarah and her new husband Clark. Clark wanted to expand the plantation and therefore planted about 650 acres of indigo and cotton. They owned slaves who took care of the land and cared for their children. There is a story told of one girl named Chloe. Clark was having an affair with Chloe against her wishes. She was scared to come forward and tell Sarah as she feared being sent to the fields. One day she was attempting to eavesdrop on Sarah and Clark when she was found. As punishment, they cut off one of her ears. Chloe wanted revenge for the way she had been treated, so she bakes a birthday cake for the family with oleander. Clark chose not to eat any of the cake, but Sarah and the children did. They got very sick and Sarah and 2 of the children died, leaving only Clark and his daughter Octavia. The other slaves would not help Chloe escape. Afraid of the wrath her actions may place on them, they hung her from a tree on the property. Since then, there have been sightings of Chloe around the property. She has even been captured in pictures taken there. She is usually seen in a reflection of one of the windows. It is clear to see when the apparition is Chloe due to her missing ear. These are not the only deaths that occurred at the plantation. Once Clark only had his daughter, he moved and sold off the property. One of the unfortunate people to call it home was William Winters. William was shot on the porch. He crawled back into his home and attempted to crawl up the stairs, but only made it to the 7th step. It is said if you take a picture of the stairs, you can still see the blood stains left over from his attack. If you are in a different room, you may also hear a dragging noise coming from the front entryway. These are just the ghosts who we know of. If the house is built on an Indian burial ground, we can't be sure just how haunted the place is or who exactly haunts it. In at number 2 we have House of the Seven Gables, Salem. The House of Seven Gables was built in 1668 by a Salem sea captain and merchant named John Turner. 3 generations of the Turner family lived in the seaside mansion before it was sold to Captain Samuel Ingersoll in 1782. An active captain during the Great Age of Sail, Ingersoll died at sea, leaving the property to his daughter Susanna, cousin of famed author Nathaniel Hawthorne. The house is known for being one of the key locations during the Salem witch trials. In 1692, the first woman was accused of witchcraft. Her name was Sarah Good. It was said that just before her death, she cursed the priest, saying, "I am no more a witch than you are a wizard, and if you take my life, God will give you blood to drink." Some say that this cursed not only the priest, but the land. Her story was recently turned into a 3-part trilogy, Fear Street, where her last name was changed to Fear. Since then, it was believed that the area was cursed and hauntings continued to plague the town. Of course, Sarah was not the only woman who had this horrible fate. 30 other women were found guilty of witchcraft and others suffered while being accused. They even locked away a 5-year-old girl, Sarah's daughter, for 6 months while deciding if she was guilty. There is no doubt that the land has known suffering and many tortured souls died here. There have been reports of disembodied voices around the house. One man reported that during his visit to the house he felt the presence of a woman. She got closer to him and he heard a whisper of shh in his ear. There's also been many reports of people seeing figures in the distance around the property. If you attempt to approach these figures, they will disappear, meaning you can never get close to them. The house is now a museum for the witch trials as well as the life of Nathaniel Hawthorne. They offer ghost tours so you can learn more about the horrors that happened here. And finally, coming in at number 1, we have Rolling Hills Asylum in New York. Rolling Hills Asylum was actually a poorhouse for those in need. Often resembling a reformatory, a poorhouse often housed orphan children, families, destitutes, elderly, physically handicapped, mentally unstable, morally corrupt, and even criminals. These institutions were situated on the grounds of a poor farm on which able-bodied residents were required to work. Such farms were common in the United States in the 19th and early 20th centuries. These sites were often run by the local government. On December 4th, 1826, the Genesee County Board of Supervisors met in Bethany for the purpose of establishing a county poorhouse. A brick building, originally a stagecoach tavern, was expanded to create the housing. A statement was put out to the community outlining who was eligible. Anyone seen as destitute was ordered to move to the poorhouse. This meant mixing the elderly and homeless families with the criminally insane. They invited lunatics and drunkards to live and work on the farm. It was a self-sufficient community and the cost of living for each resident engagement was very low. Residents were referred to as inmates no matter why they were there. Everyone was viewed as the same once there. The able-bodied would build, raise animals, or try to sell produce to the local communities. As they grew, they opened a bakery and wood shop, which created and sold coffins. The county would bury those who had no family, and records indicate there was once a cemetery located on the property, but the particulars are almost non-existent. These people were neglected and forgotten by society. It's unknown how many people died here, but it is believed to be a few thousand. They were often buried without any record of who they were. As they were self-sufficient, the government hardly interfered with their affairs, so many died of illness, old age, and other deaths were from unknown causes. There are not many stories from those who lived here, so the particulars of day-to-day life is unknown. One can only imagine the horrors that could have occurred from putting all of the criminally insane with the unfortunate orphans, widows, and unwed mothers. Due to all of this, it is seen as one of the most haunted locations in the area. There are a few known stories of the spirits who still roam the land. One tragic story is of a boy named Roy. He suffered with gigantism, a physical deformity that left him with a protruding facial feature, large hands and feet, and a height of over 7 feet. Roy was the son of a prominent banker, and his physical appearance was an embarrassment to his family. At age 12, Roy was dropped at the Genesee County home and was left there until his death at age 62. Roy liked opera music and was generally kind. There have been reports of his large shadow being seen around the grounds, particularly moving around the main building. It is believed he likes to watch through the windows of what is going on with the area today. Not all spirits who live here are as friendly as Roy. There was once a nurse believed to be called Emmy, who was believed to have performed satanic rituals, inviting not only new spirits to roam the land but also keep any that tried to leave attached to it. She herself was said to be cruel and wicked. It is said when she is in your presence you will feel a weight on your chest and an uneasy feeling. We'll never know just how many spirits are stuck here or the horrors they might have faced. Coming in at number 5, we have Capuchin Monastery Catacombs, Palermo, Italy. This location is not for the squeamish. The Capuchin Monastery Catacombs is home to thousands of well-dressed corpses, one of the world's most bizarre and morbid tourist attractions. After walking through the monastery, you descend into the catacombs where you have the chance to share small, enclosed space with thousands of corpses that have been well preserved. Some hanging from the walls, some laying down, and others sat on benches. They believe that having the dead on display like this shows respect to them. Here, nothing stands between the living and the dead, other than a sign asking people to be respectful. The ill-lit, musty catacombs have been separated into a few corridors, each one hosting a specific type of person. There is a room for religious figures, mainly those affiliated with the monastery, for professionals such as doctors, and a room for women. There is a corpse of a person that's said to be so well preserved that she simply looks like she is sleeping. She has been given the name Sleeping Beauty. I don't know about you, but that sounds pretty terrifying. It is believed that the particularly dry atmosphere allowed for the natural mummification of the bodies. Initially, priests would lay the dead on shelves and allow them to drip until they were completely depleted of bodily fluids. A full year later, the dried out corpse would be rinsed with vinegar before being redressed in their best attire and sent to their proper room to stand for eternity. Who knows how many of their spirits still roam the catacombs with no way out? It's not a question I want to find the answer to. In at number 4, we have Black Swan Hotel in York, England. The city of York was built back in 71 AD and was founded between 8000 and 7000 BC. First inhabited by Romans, then Vikings, it has a long history, making it the perfect place for ghosts and spirits to roam. Some have even claimed that it is the most haunted city in the world. Just one of the many haunted locations in York is the Black Swan pub. It was built for William Bowes, a merchant and sheriff of York, in 1417, who also became Lord Mayor in 1428. There are few unusual features and stories surrounding the pub. There is a passageway that was built under the building. It is unclear why this was built, but there have been rumors it once led to the church. It has since been sealed off, but you can still see the stairs leading down under the building and a hallway leading off into the distance. The pub was used as a horse refuge during World War II, and there are even stories of men coming to the pub to auction off their wives during 1884. Through the history of the building, there have been a few spirits who have decided to stick around. around. One of the regulars is a workman in a bowler hat who regularly fidgets and tuts, as if he is waiting for someone to arrive. He is often seen walking from room to room or waiting at the bar before fading away. No one knows who this spirit is, but it is believed he has been here since 1850, when bowler hats were introduced. Some say he resembles Charlie Chaplin. But he is not the only spirit who inhabits the pub, also frequently seen as a young woman in a long white dress. She stands at the bar in the back room gazing into the fireplace. You can see the grief in the woman's face. She appears to be dealing with some kind of loss. This is just one of the many haunted buildings around York, so travel here at your own risk. Coming in at number 3, we have Hill of Crosses, Lithuania. The Hill of Crosses in Lithuania may be the most remarkable location we have on our entire list, because as the name suggests, it is quite literally a hill filled to the brim with crosses. The Hill of Crosses is a site of pilgrimage in northern Lithuania, with the precise location being uncertain. According to historians, it is said that the first crosses were placed there after the 1831 uprising. Year after year, crosses, crucifixes, and even statues of the Virgin Mary have been brought to this location, with the exact number of crosses now being unknown. However, some reports state between 55,000 to 100,000, which is insane. Back in 1993, my year of birth, Pope John Paul II visited the Hill of Crosses, declaring it to be the place for hope, peace, love, and sacrifice. Now, over the years, crosses have been placed there for many reasons: to express a desire for Lithuanian independence, and like I stated before, as a form of defiance following an uprising in 1831. During Soviet occupation between 1944 to 1991, the crosses were bulldozed 3 times by the Soviets. However, locals were persistent and they kept rebuilding. A BBC reporter visited the site back in 2017, stating, I quote, "As the wind blows across the fields of rural Swalia County, ornate rosaries clink against metal and wooden crucifixes, filling the air with eerie chimes. As you would expect, a place like this filled with such history and such unrest is reported to be haunted, with many visitors to the site experiencing strange goings on and a general sense of unease amongst the crosses." Coming in at number 2, we have Aradale Asylum, Australia. Also referred to as the Aradale Mental Hospital, this is a former psychiatric hospital located in Ararat, which is a rural city in southwest Victoria, Australia. Originally named Ararat Lunatic Asylum, this was commissioned along with 2 other buildings, Kew and Beechworth, to house the growing number of, I quote, lunatics in Victoria. The asylum at the time was a sprawling complex, with it estimated that around 13,000 people died there during its operation. However, not all of these deaths were attributed to natural causes. Some were said to have been tortured and even murdered. Each and every year, tours take place at the former asylum, with it being reported that the ghost of Nurse Kelly is said to haunt the walls. Specifically the women's wing of the hospital. Visitors to the asylum have reported feeling ghost hands touch them, cold air in certain spots, and unexplainable sensations. The asylum was decommissioned back in the early 1990s, with many of the patients being transferred to community living. It has since become a campus of the Melbourne Polytechnic, administered by Melbourne's Polytechnic's Ararat Training Centre. And finally, in at number 1, we have Myrtle's Plantation, USA. Located in St. Francisville, Louisiana in the United States, Myrtle's Plantation is a historic home and former antebellum plantation that is rumored to be one of the most haunted homes in all of the United States. Now, like all famous ghost stories and haunted house stories, the plantation is rumored to be built atop a burial ground, specifically an ancient Tunica Indian burial ground. Back in 1796, the home was constructed by General David Bradford and was named Laurel Grove. He resided there for several years until President John Adams pardoned him for his role in the Whiskey Rebellion that took place in 1799. Quite the history. People came and went from the home, and during the period of 1854, the home was officially renamed the Myrtles, after the crepe myrtles that grew in the vicinity. It's said that around 12 ghosts haunt the Myrtles plantation, with 10 of them supposedly having been murdered inside of the home. However, historical records only report the death of William Winter, a former attorney who lived in the plantation from 1865 to 1871. He was ultimately shot by a stranger before he staggered inside of his home and died on the 17th step of the stairs. Visitors to the plantation often report hearing his dying footsteps, as do employees in the hotel, which is of course what it is now, a bed and breakfast specifically, that offers historical and mystery tours. It doesn't just stop there though, many also report sightings of the ghost of a former slave, as well as a haunted mirror that is said to hold the ghost of Sarah Woodruff and her children who once resided in the home. Very spooky indeed. If you're feeling adventurous, go book yourself a room. Just be careful when ascending the stairs and looking in the mirror.
Number 5 on this list is Tranquil Sanatorium in British Columbia. Tranquil Sanatorium has quite an extensive and tragic history to it, which has caused its walls to be the home to many undead spirits. A sanatorium, if you weren't familiar, is an establishment which has the sole purpose of housing those with long-term illnesses and is often associated with tuberculosis. The one that we're talking about right now is no different. It was built in 1907 as a facility to treat people with tuberculosis. However, it didn't stay like this for very long. The purpose of the facility eventually changed to become an insane asylum. It acted as this mental institute for a while until finally becoming abandoned in the late 1980s. Due to its deep history with death, disease, mental illness, it's no wonder that the Tranquil Sanatorium is now deeply haunted. The layout of this facility screams something out of a Stephen King book. It has several buildings that are connected by poorly lit underground tunnels. The building itself looks all too eerie from the outside as well, with dirty cream colored walls that have seen far better days as rot and mold slowly devour them. Visitors of this place report feeling extremely uneasy. A common note for most people that visit is the presence of orbs, strange balls of light that flutter throughout the building and then disappear. Some people have reported seeing a ghostly apparition on the 6th floor. This ghost takes the form of a woman not older than 30. She appears to be crying and screaming. The tunnels are said to be particularly haunted. People have reported screams coming from nowhere, flashes of movement, menacing and animalistic groans that make you feel as if somebody is right behind you. Children can also be heard playing every now and again in some of the more open areas of the building. Clearly, this place's dark history has impacted it greatly, and just because physical humans decided to abandon it in the 80s doesn't mean that it was truly abandoned for good. Number 4 on this list is the Firkins House. The Firkins House is part of Fort Edmonton Park, which, you guessed it, is located in Edmonton, Alberta. Fort Edmonton Park is a little tourist attraction that has buildings from 1885, 1905, and 1920 to represent the homes of the time. One of the houses is the Firkins House. This home is interesting because during my research, I couldn't find any particular evidence of wrongdoings or tragic events at this home. In fact, for the most part, it seems like a pretty normal house. People have lived there before and no harm has befell them, but it seems that after they moved out and the home was donated, that's when things started to go a little bit haywire. There are reportedly 3 ghosts or demons that haunt this home, each one scarier and more dangerous than the next. The first one is the ghost of a beautiful floating woman who is dressed in all white. People have said that they've spotted her in the windows of the home looking out at them or slowly drifting throughout the living room. The second one is the ghost of a little boy. The boy will appear to certain people looking extremely ill. It is currently unknown if this boy died in and around the area or what disease he is suffering from, but it is said that he resides in the home with the woman in white. The third being is by far the scariest of all 3. A ventriloquist dummy that will appear in the home or in the cupboards. This thing can move all by itself and talk by itself. It is very similar to the popular horror franchise Chucky, and it's said by some to be seeking to harm the living. I'm not sure if the ghost of the ventriloquist has taken over this dummy or if the dummy has taken on its own persona, but I definitely do not want to go anywhere where the primary residence is a demon puppet.
Coming in at 3, Eastern State Penitentiary, Philadelphia. Also known as ESP, this is a former American prison located in Pennsylvania and was operational from 1829 to 1971. America's most notorious criminals lived in these walls, including Al Capone and bank robber Willie Sutton. Initially designed by John Haviland, Eastern State is considered to be the world's first true penitentiary and was renowned for its revolutionary system of incarceration, also known as the Pennsylvania system, or separate system, which encouraged separate confinement for inmates as a form of rehabilitation. Inmates were housed in cells that could only be accessed by a small door that led to an equally as small exercise yard attached to the back of the prison. Rumor has it the doors were small so prisoners would have a harder time attempting to get out, thus minimizing the chances of a guard getting attacked. While others have suggested the small doors forced prisoners to bow while entering or exiting their cells, which is related to penance and ties in with the religious inspiration of the prison. When an inmate would leave the cell, his head would be covered with a hood, so he couldn't see or be seen by others. However, by 1913, the penitentiary was forced to abandon abandon its solitary system due to overcrowding, before closing its doors entirely in 1970. As of today, the penitentiary welcomes thousands of visitors yearly for both its museum and ghost tours, with some folks reporting paranormal happenings including disembodied laughter, shadowy figures, and pacing footsteps. Coming in at 2, St. Augustine Lighthouse, Florida. This lighthouse is a private aid to navigation and an active working lighthouse in Florida, and was built between 1871 and 1874. As it stands, nearly 225,000 people visit the lighthouse annually, due to its reputation for otherworldly visitors. The lighthouse has had many tragedies over the years, with one of its many ghosts rumored to be that of a lighthouse keeper who fell to his death while painting the tower. Not only that, but 3 young girls also drowned when their cart they were playing on broke and fell into the ocean, with some visitors claiming to hear the sounds of children playing in and around the lighthouse. This haunted location has been featured in episodes of the sci-fi series Ghost Hunters, as well as My Ghost Story. However, researcher Joe Nickell, who investigated the lighthouse, has stated that there is no credible evidence the place is haunted, and instead noted that the spooky noises are just seagulls or even the wind. Party pooper. And finally, coming in at number 1, Leap Castle Island. Leap Castle, yep, it's pronounced Leap, is a castle located in Craigdarroch County, Offaly Island. Now, there are varied accounts of when the castle came to be, with most sources pointing to the 13th century or even as late as the 15th century. Now, it was originally built by the O'Bannon clan before ruling was taken over by the O'Carroll clan. However, all was not well within the castle. Legend has it that during a struggle for power within the clan during the 1530s, one member plunged a sword into his brother, a priest, while he was holding mass in the castle chapel. The butchered priest fell across the altar and passed away in front of his family. The room is now formally known as the Bloody Chapel, with many witnesses claiming to have spotted the priest haunting the area at night. However, that's not all. The castle's history is incredibly macabre. During renovations in the early 1900s, a few workmen stumbled across a secret dungeon in the Bloody Chapel that was housing human skeletons that filled 3 cartloads when hauled away. The dungeon was designed in a way that prisoners would fall through a trapdoor and instantly have their lungs punctured by wooden spikes at the bottom, ultimately dying a slow and painful death. Many tourists have also spoken of a red lady who is reported to walk the halls at night holding a dagger. The castle has become notorious around the globe, with media flocking to capture its paranormal offerings, including ABC Family's Scariest Places on Earth and Living TV's Most Haunted.
Number 5 on this list is the Château de Camargue. The Château de Camargue is located in Périgord, an ancient region of France. The chateau isn't as beautiful as it once was, some of its former glory lost to time and also to war. This chateau was a critical point of interest in the 100 Years' War between France and Britain. It was the host to one of the more brutal fights that the war ever saw and was eventually captured by the British. As was typical back then, when you captured a place, many of the people that were running that place were either captured or put to death. One person of interest was put to death by being beheaded, and that was the young lover of the daughter of the Earl of Camargue. It's said that this man was deeply in love with the daughter and that she was in love with him as well. His beheading didn't seem like a major point of interest to the British at the time, but it actually left a bit of a spirit behind. What's really interesting about this story though is that it wasn't the spirit of this young man that was left behind, it also wasn't the spirit of the young daughter or even the Earl of Camargue himself. In fact, it was the spirit of this young man's horse. The horse that this young man rode into battle with to attempt to defend the chateau, and the horse that he had his whole life. Its ghost has yet to pass on. It's said that the ghost of this horse wanders the grounds of the chateau searching for its master. People who have ventured into the castle have reported hearing the clicking of hooves and a deep groan from a horse. People have also reported seeing this dead horse's ghost walking around the grounds of the chateau as if it was defending it from potential invaders like it did in the past. It's suggested that if you do intend to visit this chateau, that you don't bring any negative energy with you. The horse could potentially interpret this as a threat and come after you. Some have even suggested bringing a carrot or an apple and leaving it at the front of the chateau as a sign of good faith towards this ghostly steed. Number 4 on this list is the Palace des Tuileries. The Palace des Tuileries is home to one of France's most known ghosts who has been nicknamed the Red Man. The Red Man has been around for several hundred years and has two potential stories of origin. The first story talks about a man nicknamed Jack the Skinner worked for Catherine de' Medici after her husband Henry II died. He worked as a hitman for her and would be sent to murder potential political foes. He was exceptional at his work, but eventually there grew a time where the Queen was worried that he knew too much about her. After all, he knew exactly how many people she had had executed, considering he had done the executing. To make sure her secrets were safe, she had another man murder him. He killed him in the garden, which I should note is typically the area linked to this haunting, and then he left his body in said garden. When he came back to fetch the corpse, it was missing. Then, the Queen's astrologist told her that he foretold some great disaster happening to the people of Tuileries and that John would be at the forefront of it. Since then, whenever the Red Man appears, it's said that a tragic event will happen to the people surrounding his appearance. The second origin story is that when this palace was built, the Red Man was already there. This ghost spoke to Catherine de' Medici and foretold her death, and even though she forsook him and the palace that she had built, the prediction he had made turned out to eventually be true. Pierre-Jean de Béranger, a famous French poet, describes the Red Man as being a small man clothed from top to toe in scarlet, whose eye is so piercing and unearthly that it terrifies the most courageous. He never speaks, nor are his visits of much length. He vanishes soon after his presence is discovered. This has been echoed throughout time, as many French nobles have received visits from the Red Man before. Henry IV, Louis XVI, Marie Antoinette have all had visits from him in the past. There's even a story talking about how the Red Man appeared in front of Napoleon right before his death. There are tons of beautiful palaces in France, and if it was me, I'd avoid this one and go to one of them. Better to be safe than sorry when we're dealing with a devil-like demon whose presence means impending doom.
Coming in at number 3, Battleship Island, Nagasaki, Japan. Also known as Hashima Island, this is the abandoned island nearby the city of Nagasaki in southern Japan, and is one of 505 uninhabited islands in Nagasaki Prefecture. In the 1950s, it was a bustling place home to thousands of coal mine workers and families. However, ever since the coal mine shut down in 1974, it has remained abandoned. As petroleum replaced coal in Japan in the 1960s, coal mines began to close across the country, with Mitsubishi officially closing the mine in January 1974, and the island was completely cleared by April of the same year. Today, its most notable features are the abandoned and still mostly intact apartment buildings, the surrounding sea walls, and its distinctive profile shape. In 2009, Japan requested to include Hashima Island along with 22 other industrial sites in the UNESCO World Heritage Site list, which was initially opposed by South Korean authorities on the grounds that Korean and Chinese forced laborers were used on the island prior and during World War II. Although Hashima was entirely closed off until 2009, travelers are now allowed to visit, with it being recognized by UNESCO in 2015. You may also recognize the site from the big screen, with it serving as the secret headquarters of Bond villain Raoul Silva in the 2012 movie Skyfall. In at 2, Lizzie Borden's house, Fall River, Massachusetts. Now, for those who don't know, the Lizzie Borden house is where Lizzie Borden and her family lived, and is located on 230 2nd Street in the city of Fall River, Massachusetts. Born Lizzie Andrew Borden, sucks for her, she was an American woman who was the main suspect in the August 4th, 1892 axe murders of her father and stepmother. However, Borden was tried and ultimately acquitted of the murders. The case received widespread newspaper coverage throughout the United States, and following her release from jail, where she was held during the trial, Borden chose to remain in the house her parents had been killed in, despite being ostracized by her other residents. Now, because the Commonwealth of Massachusetts elected to not charge anyone with the murder that occurred over 127 years ago, a ton of speculation about the crimes have continued on. Now, Lizzie spent the rest of her life in the home up until her death at age 66, just days before the death of her sister Emma. The house has been operated as a bed and breakfast since 1990. 1996 under the ownership of Martha McGinn, who inherited the home. According to Martha McGinn, the room where Lizzie's stepmother Abby Borden was found murdered is the most requested room at the bed and breakfast. Guests who stay, not just in Abby's room but in the home as a whole, have reported all manners of strange sightings in the home. Would you dare stay there? I would. I'd stay in every room. And finally, coming in at number 1, Chernobyl, Pripyat, Ukraine. Pripyat is a ghost city in northern Ukraine named after the nearby Pripyat River and was founded on February 4th, 1970 as the 9th nuclear city in the Soviet Union to serve the nearby Chernobyl nuclear power plant. The city was officially proclaimed in 1979 and had grown to a population of 49,360 by the time it was evacuated on April 27th, 1986, the day after the Chernobyl disaster. Now, the Chernobyl disaster was a nuclear disaster which occurred on April 26, 1986 at the nuclear power plant not far from Pripyat, and was considered to be the worst nuclear disaster in history, and is also one of the only 2 nuclear energy disasters rated at 7, the maximum severity on the International Nuclear Event Scale, the other being the 2011 Fukushima Daiichi nuclear disaster in Japan. Ever since the nuclear disaster in Pripyat, the city has remained entirely uninhabited since the evacuation, although the buildings, furniture and all other signs of life are exactly where the former citizens left them. It is a city frozen in time, plates still out, dolls left on beds, and even a haunting fairground ride waiting to be used. Weathered books can be found in classrooms and abandoned photographs are still hanging on walls in their original frames. There are strict rules regarding the site considering the sheer amount of radiation in the area. However, following the airing of HBO's Chernobyl series, Ukraine's government have announced that the site will become an official tourist attraction. Will you be checking it out? I personally don't want to die, so I won't.